what can we do to make sure we're building the pipeline of women?
Women have been basically 5% or less of the Fortune 500 CEOs for over a decade.
Running a company is hard.
Sexism in Silicon Valley. Is it real? Do you live it? It is real.
Good morning, I'm Stephanie Ruhle. I just want to take a moment. I want everyone to drink in. How great is this extraordinary? 4 amazing women in business. We talk so much about how there's not enough. Well, there's 4 incredible ones right here. So thank you all for being here.
Yes.
Thank you. There is passion, there is support for women in leadership, but what we don't have are numbers. And when we look at the data again and again, it's crushing. It's almost like a broken record. And Sallie, I want to start with you. The amount of women running Fortune 500 companies remains at 5%. You had an extraordinary career on Wall Street, one of the most senior women in banking. We thought after the financial crisis, finally, things would get cracked, things would shake up, we'd see women move to the top, and still, it hasn't happened. What do you believe is the explanation?
Well, actually, it's worse than that on Wall Street. So I think everybody here would be of the view that if there had been more diversity on Wall Street, think about those big trading floors, all those white middle-aged guys. And by the way, we love white middle-aged guys. I've been married to a couple of them. I think they're totally just super, super amazing creatures. But the research is clear that homogenous teams tend to overtrust each other. And that is clearly what happened going into the financial crisis. So you would think coming out of the financial crisis, we would have seen more diversity come into Wall Street, but Wall Street's gone backwards. So it went into the downturn white, male, and middle-aged. It's come out whiter, maler, and middle-ageder, which means that our markets have not gotten more safe because of it. And it also means that the industry tends to misserve vast swaths of people, such as women, that it tends to be a very male business. Men in our society invest more than women do because the industry is so male, for male, by male, and it leaves women with a gender investing gap. We talk about the gender pay gap, we don't talk about the gender investing gap, which can cost women hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars over the course of their lives because the industry doesn't serve them well. Why has it happened? It's not bad people, let's keep out the girls. It's a comfort level, right? It's we should put Joe in that job because Joe can do it, because Joe looks so darn much like me.
Susan, we'd like to have more hope for the tech industry. When you look at Wall Street, you could say, well, all those seats down on the New York Stock Exchange were owned by white men and it went to their son and their son, but tech, I mean, you run YouTube. In our minds, YouTube doesn't look white and male. It's every color and it's every age around the world. So why is it in the tech industry are we right back to this old boys club when everybody's so young?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I mean, I think it's a really important one because if we look at our future and we look at where the jobs coming, how our industry is being affected, a lot of times the answer is it's tech. So tech jobs are going at 3 times the rate of other jobs. And the fact that we don't have as many women in a field that is really changing so many fields and that is so influential and has so much job creation, like that turns into a societal issue that we have fewer women there. And I think at the end of the day, it has to do with the fact that for whatever reason, we have fewer women who are graduating with computer science degrees. Right now, the number is around 20%. And that creates a cycle of an industry that is more male.
What did you study?
So I studied history and literature. Yeah, and actually, so I think this is like a really important point. Is like I decided my senior year in college that I would take a computer science class. because I actually had done some work at a startup just sort of coincidentally. Like, it wasn't like I planned. I was a temp, and I just happened to be at this startup, and I realized like how cool it was. And I thought, well, I'm going to take some computer science. And so I actually always tell people, like, it's never too late. No matter where you are in your career, it's never too late to start thinking about, like, how could you enter this field, which, you know, I think it's represented as a very male, individualistic, you know, very geeky, boring, stats-oriented type of industry, whereas, like, I always saw it as really creative. I thought, like, I can build stuff, I can make stuff, it's visual, that stuff can be, those products can be used by a global audience, you work in teams, and so I just wish more women saw that. They saw the opportunity, they overcame the concerns about the kind of geeky male culture, because we need more women. We need a lot more women to change the culture and to make tech accessible to everybody.
We say we need more women, we need more women. We go to conferences where male CEOs get up in front and they talk about how important it is, and then they walk out the side door, and the other people who are sitting in the front row, all of his lieutenants, they walk out the side door, and then we're all left having wine and cheese. So Arianna, you are a CEO at HuffPost, at Thrive, but you're a founder. And now you work with all sorts of companies and all sorts of CEOs. If you hadn't been a founder yourself, created what you've led, do you think you would have made it to the CEO ranks?
So I think there is another reason beyond what Sallie and Susan mentioned, and I agree with both the points they made, that we need to look at. And this is the fact that it's not enough for women in any industry to look at breaking through the glass ceiling. We need to actually change workplaces. Mm-hmm. Right now, if you think of it, workplaces were designed by men, and they are not working. They are not working for women, they are not working for men, they are not working for polar bears, they are not sustainable. You know, they are fueled by burnout and stress, and there is this delusion that men build workplaces on, based on the false science that in order to succeed, in order to achieve, in order to get to the top, you have to burn out in the process. And all the science proves otherwise. So that creates a kind of macho culture of exhausted, burnt out men acting out. Because we can say that from ourselves. When we are exhausted and burned out, we are acting out. I know from myself, I'm more impatient, I'm more reactive, I'm not as empathetic, I'm not as kind, and it's inevitable. It's just that's how the human operating system was designed. Human beings are not machines. Ever since the first industrial revolution, and you've written beautifully, Miki, about the fourth, we thought we could treat human beings like machines and minimize downtime. But, you know, downtime is a feature of the human operating system. It's not a bug. I mean, remember, look at the myth of creation, you know. God worked very hard and created heaven and earth in 6 days, and then she took the seventh day off. We need to remember that and to apply it in what we're doing. That's why I wanted to launch an entire company about that, because on top of it, the data shows that women internalize stress more. We have a harder time dealing with stress because we're more perfectionist, we're unfortunately more judgmental of ourselves. So we have 40% of women in stressful jobs have a greater risk of heart disease, and 60% have a greater risk of diabetes. So we need to change the workplaces, otherwise women themselves take themselves out of the process. Look at the numbers of women who leave before they reach the top.
Miki, put us in a boardroom in Japan.
Oh.
You're one of the most senior people at Boston Consulting Group, but put all of this into context, because in Japan, there's even less.
So first of all, it is so great to be back in the US, in New York. I know we've talked about glass ceilings, but there's a thicker bamboo ceiling, certainly in the neighborhoods that I operated in Japan for the last 10 years. We're not where we need to be. We're 111 out of 144 countries in the world, according to the World Economic Forum, in terms of women in leadership. The US, by the way, is 45. It's a good number, but not a great number. I guess, but life's too hard if you think it's too hard. So you have to get up on a Monday morning and believe that tomorrow will be better. And what are the better signs? We know whether it's in Japan or abroad, it's not a capability issue. We are capable. We do well in school. We enter the workforce. We now know it's not about the lack of ambition. We're equally ambitious as men. It's the context and it's the surroundings. And the glimmer of hope I have is that the he for she movement, albeit slowly, has started to catch on in Japan. But the economic reality of the third largest country in the world, where there's not enough babies being had because the women aren't having babies, we're growing old, is the extreme talent shortage. You know, we're kind of a boiling frog situation in a boardroom where you talk about all of this stuff and you say it matters, diversity matters, but maybe it doesn't today, but it will matter because we need the talent, and if you're not accessing half the world, you're going to lose competitive advantage. So it's tough being, 1 out of 100 versus 1 out of 10, but I'm hopeful.
The he for she movement, thoughtful leadership, these are extraordinary themes we've been talking about a lot. For me this week, that glimmer of hope that Miki's referencing, it dimmed yesterday. When, as it relates to sexism, in the last 10 years, across corporate America, we have shifted to a zero tolerance corporate culture level. And yesterday, when the President of the United States, not having any back information, was basically cut out of a 1984 movie or an HR video that you have to take for mandatory training where it's, man, he's a good guy, he couldn't have done that. And then someone walks in and says, no, that is not acceptable corporate behavior. That happened yesterday. It happened. So, Sallie, you come from a Wall Street background.
Right.
We thought we weren't going to see that anymore. In banks, you could have a massively profitable trader, but at this point, if they behave in any way where there'd be a violation, they would have to leave. But now, are we going to move backwards?
Well, I'm not sure. I'd actually take it a little bit differently. I'm not sure we were as far forward as we thought we were. Remember this summer we saw in the New York Times, there was an op-ed from a gentleman talking about the bro talk that was still going on Wall Street and how it was holding women back. We've got the Uber issue that's now front and center. We have the issues you've spoken about. And it really, Stephanie, over the summer, it hit me like a punch in the gut, where I thought I was senior at the company at which this guy worked. And I thought we were past all of it, but what was going on behind these closed doors? And I got together with a very good friend of mine, a man, and said, is this happening still? And his answer was, in some circles, yes, but in other circles, no, but kind of. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, the conversations that are still going on are the ones about she's got great legs, or I wouldn't touch her with a 10-foot pole. And I said, you're one of my best friends. What do you say when you're in that circumstance? And he said, I say nothing. And I said, why? And he said, because I have to work with these people. And I said, well, so do I. And so I'm not sure. I think it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I keep being so hopeful that the fact that gender diverse leadership teams lead to higher returns on equity, higher returns on sale, greater client engagement, greater employee engagement, greater innovation. The power of diversity is so substantial that diverse teams outperform smarter and more capable teams. They deliver better stock price returns over time, and startups that have women deliver 63% better returns. I'm hopeful someday that breaks through. We are in a friggin' capitalist society. You'd think they'd go after performance, but for whatever reason, it still hasn't been enough to overcome the biases about what leadership looks like that every single one of us has, men and women.
But that's what's changing. I think what's changing is that it's much harder to keep this thing secret. What happened with Roger Ailes? It took years, but he's finally out. What happened with your friend who wrote the op-ed in the New York Times? What's happening at Uber that I'm very involved in? Everything is coming to the surface. I think that's the first step. So it may make us feel, oh, things are getting worse. I think there is more of a spotlight on the bad things.
Right.
And that's really the first step. That's the catalyst for real change.
In Uber's example, do you think it's individual bad apples, or do you think it's a case of a startup, a culture that hasn't matured yet, and they just don't know how to behave like grown-ups?
Well, first of all, as I'm chairing the board subcommittee to which Eric Holder is reporting, I need to start by saying that we are waiting for the Eric Holder report. They are doing a very thorough investigation, thousands of interviews, and the report is coming out at the end of April. So that will give us a very much fuller picture. But I've also spoken to hundreds of women at Uber. And I think two things are happening. One is something that every woman here knows, which is that when you don't have as many women at the top, things happen that shouldn't be happening, even at the most trivial level. Like I had 3 women attorneys, young women attorneys with babies, come to me and say there aren't enough family rooms to pump in, and they're really stressed out about it, especially because one manager told one of them she should be pumping at 8 a.m. And she told him this is the time she feeds the baby. She can't pump at the same time. But when I called Rachel Holt, who is 33 years old, runs all Uber operations in America and Canada, and told her about it, she said, in Washington, where she's based, she said, not only do I have enough family rooms, I bought the pumps for everybody. Why? Because she's a mom, because she has a 2-year-old, because she had to pump and go to work. Incidentally, talking of pumping stories, my favorite is Susan's. We were in Davos 2 years ago when her fifth baby was born, and we were sitting next to each other at the dinner, and she said to me, you know, I have to pump, I have to leave to go pump, and then I said, what do you do with it? He said, I freeze it out in the balcony because it's so cold. And I said, fantastic, can you take a picture and Instagram it? And she did, which I think is such a great message. There is the woman. So that makes a difference. I'm sure it makes a difference at YouTube to know that there is the woman running it who is freezing her milk on a balcony in Davos.
But I think I want to underscore a very important point that you've made, which is there is so much wonderful attention and so many initiatives around getting more women on boards, and I applaud every single one of them. That being said, in my experience, having been in quite a number of boardrooms and senior leadership positions, the real change comes from having senior women within the companies. Mm-hmm. The women on the boards can set the policies, but it's the women who make the micro decisions within the companies about whether, okay, everybody's got a flexibility program, but it's really whether it's flexibility without shame. It's whether there are enough pumping rooms. It's whether, you know, you treat everybody humanely. It's those decisions that get made at the senior leadership that really are make or break for whether the companies have truly diverse and people-friendly cultures.
Yeah. Just to build on that point, Sal, you know, the work we've done, again, looking at all sorts of companies around the world, it's not the high-level policy stuff. It's not the aspiration to be more diverse. It's not even the generic policies. It's very specific. Yes. It's the pumping room. And if it's at flex time, it's not, you can be flexible, but between Monday and Tuesday from 8 to 2 p.m. It's true flexibility. And if you survey men versus women in most corporations, there is a gap in terms of what women really value, particularly kind of, you know, at that early stage of motherhood, if that's the path we choose, to get that support and get through it and then keep going up. So I totally agree with your statement about women in management as opposed to just on boards. We've got to be at every layer of the pyramid by definition to make.
And also women feeling free to speak up about what is important to them. One of the things we do in our Thrive trainings is an entry interview, not just an exit interview, but asking everybody what's really important to you. You'd be surprised how many women say, what's important to me is at 7 or 7:30 or 8 to take my kid to school. Mm-hmm. If the team knows that, they can arrange their schedule around conference calls, etc., accordingly. But women have been reluctant to say that, or the equivalent, because they feel they're going to be categorized as being on the mommy track.
Right.
Well, so one thing I'd add is, I mean, I definitely agree. Having women, being a senior woman at Google, like I've always been the one saying like, yes, we need better pumping rooms, we need pumps, we need hospital grade pumps, we need refrigerators, we need all those things. But what I've also seen from an industry right now that is very male is that we need our male leaders to embrace and support women across the board. And so while I think it's really important to have women, we need all the men to also do that. And I feel like I've benefited. I've benefited from different men reaching out and supporting me. And that happened. I had a very specific incident in the last couple of years where there was an event I wanted to go to. I wasn't invited to the event. I was very upset I wasn't invited to the event.
Who wouldn't invite the CEO of YouTube?
Well, that was my point. Why wouldn't you invite me? But for some reason, I wasn't invited. I wound up getting the invite because I'm very persistent.
She persisted.
But by going to somebody who I knew had a lot of power. And that was a man. And he instantly understood that there was a problem. He instantly understood. He instantly supported me. And a day later, I got that invitation. And I really realized in that moment that power is transferred by those who have it. And they need, the people in power now, it has to come from the top, where they have to say, diversity is important. I'm supportive. I'm going to support Sallie. I'm going to, I see Joe has a lot of potential, Josephine is going to have a lot of potential. Like Joe could be either male or female, but they need to see those next generation leaders and support them and that's the way we're going to get more women across the board, in addition to having the women leaders at the table.
The fact that so many men are able to strictly focus on their career, does it give them a faster track? Arianna mentioned, well, just tell your company things that are important. Is it that I want to drop my kids at school? Many people feel like they only have so many asks at work. I want this new assignment, I'm interested in this or that. And there's lots of men who've been able to say, I'm just going to focus on my career. They don't ever have to think about anything in their household, anything with their children, their family planning. Does the traditional family setup give men such an advantage? Miki?
I think it has historically. And again, I was saying earlier that it's not about ambition, but the context. If you are a new mom, or you have aging parents you're taking care of. Again, bringing it back to Japan, it's a country where if you ask women in Japan versus everywhere in the world, what % of the time does your spouse or significant other help you with your housework? We rank the lowest. It's like 25% of the time, and yet 60-75% of us are working. So by definition, we have this other job versus the job. Now, that said, I think we have to make those choices ourselves. Sometimes I think we go full hog. You're working on Wall Street, my daughter's out there, she's there till God knows what time of the day, that's okay. If you're in a different life stage, I think it's okay. I don't think we're all gonna go through the forced march in the same way. But if you want to go, and if you wanna be on the fast track, then yes, I think you have to speak up. You gotta get the he for she's to help you out. My first Davos was, thank you, my chairman, a guy, who invited me there. I wouldn't have been there if he didn't pick me out of the crowd to let me go. So at those moments in time, I think you need that support not only from the men, but the women around you and your families.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think by far the hardest time is when you're early in your career and you have your first child. For me, that was the period that was the most difficult because you have the least amount of support at home, you know the least about what you're doing at work, you're trying to figure out how to balance it all, and you don't have as many skills, and you don't have any resources at your disposal. And the challenge is a lot of women think, like, I'm going to drop out of the workforce because I'm paying all my salary right now to childcare, or for someone to help manage the house in some way. But the thing is, if you look at it from a long-term perspective and you think about, well, if I stay in the workforce, I'm going to get all these benefits and over the long term, and really thinking about, like, well, what's my long-term career as a result? And I think, sure, I think it is true. Like, women traditionally do bear more of the household responsibilities. Like, whether, I'm sure there are variances among families, but society expects more. That's why we always get the question, how do you balance 5 kids and a job. Like, I'm confident that there are many men out there with lots of kids who don't get that question. Right? No one asks, no one knows, no one cares.
And Susan, you forgot, and also 20 chickens.
Oh, yeah.
She has 5 kids, a big job, and 20 chickens in the garden. But I think there is one other thing which is really important beyond the competitive disadvantage that women are put in because of we shoulder more of the family obligations. I think the other thing is something that we need to all band together and change. I please want you to join me in this campaign to stop women from thinking they have to wear something new for every occasion.
You know,
this is like a huge
you say
problem.
That every time I've never seen you wear the same
God, look
outfit
at my
twice, and your hair always
Instagram. Not
looks
only do I wear the same thing again and again and again, but I actually Instagram myself wearing the same thing again and again and again. I don't mean just at the office, who cares, but in a so-called important occasions. Last year, Time 100, 3 days later, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, I did an Instagram with both of them side by side, wearing the same dress. My message is, you know, the amount of time, energy, and attention, not to mention money, that we spend trying to look our best, you know, worrying about how we're looking, is a huge competitive disadvantage.
But hold on.
Let's have this campaign. Hashtag repeats, ladies.
But hold on. we say that, but will society accept that?
No.
Look at how some men CEOs,
Obviously
what they look
not.
like.
They're schlubs. Okay, here are the numbers. I realized this when I was CFO of Citigroup, and I remember I went to a trip to Argentina with all the guys. We stayed out till 1 a.m. We had to be back in the lobby at 4:30. We got down there, all the guys are like, I just rolled out of bed, and I'm like, 1 hour to put this together. If you only take 15 minutes more a day than a guy to get beautified, 15 minutes a day, an hour and 15 minutes a week, 5 hours a month, 60 hours a year, 1 full work week a year, and I haven't even shaved my legs yet. Right?
Yes.
So it does, you know, think about it. We just celebrated equal pay day, so that's how long we had to work into this year to earn what the guys earned for the exact same job in 2016. We have the unpaid labor gap, so we're working harder at home. You know, the whole thing's exhausting. It's just exhausting. So my solution is that, and I don't know that you'll appreciate this, I have announced to my family that I am a mediocre mother on my best day. Best day. My son wore his lower school outfit into middle school for about 3 months before I realized he was in the wrong outfit. And so, on the one hand, we need to let things go. On the other hand, what the bosses, I think the CEOs get it. The CEOs, I think, need to start to impose their will on middle management, because the idea is a meritocracy, and so therefore we'll let you choose who to promote, because all of us have these inherent biases. What I find is they then promote the people who look just like them. And so there's this disconnect. The women come in at the bottom, the CEOs get it, and then they get lost in between here. And if the CEOs need to start saying, you've got to, I don't know that we love the word quota, but that here are your metrics and you need to live up to these, because if we have found over now decades, if we allow middle management to keep making those decisions, they just go right to people who look like themselves and nothing ever changes.
Well, things are changing thanks to the leadership of women like you, and for everyone who's here today who is making a commitment to their careers and their futures and helping one another. So ladies, thank you so, so much for your time. And I know many of you are thinking, these ladies were so fantastic, I'm just gonna call it a day and go home. But at 11:45, Justin Trudeau, I mean, maybe he'll be pretty good, I'm not sure. Justin Trudeau will be here, and if he's not going to be spectacular, Scarlett Johansson will be. So they're gonna be a tough act to follow, but we're gonna take a short break. There's an artisan stand out there, so please spend some money, support other extraordinary women, and come on back at 11:45 because you're gonna wanna see it.
All right.